Chapter 2: History and Historical Values. Where did they come from? Where did these original people living in Canada actually come from? There are two ways to talk about this. There are the traditional stories, and there is science. First, let's explore some stories. When we were created, we were given our ground to live on, and from this time these were our rights. This is all true. We were put here by the Creator. I was not brought from a foreign country and did not come here. I was put here by the Creator. Chief Weninock, Yakima, 1915. This is a very strong belief for Aboriginal people, that Canada is their homeland. This underpins much of their attitudes toward land and home. There is no mother country or ancestors across the sea somewhere. The past, their ancestors, their history is here, in Canada. Creation stories. There are creation stories from across Canada. The Mi'kmaq have the story of the Great Spirit, or Jisolg, who made everything, including Glooskap, the first human. The Haida tell of a raven that released humans from a giant clamshell. And the Inuit tell stories about Sedna, whose fingers were chopped off, and as they floated to the bottom of the ocean, became seals and walruses. These stories are expressions of spiritual truth, not necessarily historical fact, but they are deeply embedded in a way of looking at the world. Listen to this Mohawk creation story on Sky Woman. Have you ever heard the term Turtle Island? It came from this story.
In our creation story, there was a woman that came from another world. And at one time, that world came close to this planet. And that woman came here during that time. She is our great-great-grandmother for humans. She had different names. One was a Jinjagayon, which means a matured flower. Sometimes we call her Sky Woman. When Sky Woman came here, this planet had no land. It was a planet of water, and she was aided by the birds to get here safely. And a turtle came up, and they put the woman on that turtle's back. And she brought things from that other world when she came here. Strawberries and raspberries and peaches. So when she was on the turtle, the animals went after the dirt that's under the water. And they all died except one. But they brought that dirt up and they put it on the turtle. And Sky Woman walked counterclockwise around that turtle's back. And that's what made the miracle of birth happen. That's what made seeds turn into humans, and what made a little tiny corn get to be a tall cornstalk. And as she went around counterclockwise, she chanted songs that came from that other world. Some people say that's where our feather dance came from. That's what she was doing. And as she went further, that miracle of birth was multiplied. And the turtle turned into the earth, this continent, and the ground multiplied and grew. So that's why in all our longhouse ceremonies, we keep going in our circle that way. So the corn and beans will keep growing, and the trees will keep growing, because she made it grow. And she told us that's the way it's done where she came from.
Science. What about scientific and historical facts? There is science that shows how indigenous people arrived in North America. Here are two of the most common theories. 1. Humans crossed the Bering Strait, moving south, then east. 40,000-year-old evidence from the Bluefish Caves in the Yukon supports this theory. 2. The Inuit crossed the Bering Land Bridge around 1000 AD and moved east to occupy the Arctic regions of Canada and Greenland. These Bering Strait routes, as the only theoretical ideas, are now being questioned by scientists. There are other theories too. How about the idea that there may have been a migration via a high Arctic route through the Northwest Passage? Or that 3 waves of migration seem to correspond with the 3 main Native American language groups? West Coast archaeology may have been swept away or drowned with melting glaciers, but there is evidence of a possible ocean migration with a coastal landing. Another theory is that Paleo-Indians could actually be European in origin, where Stone Age Europeans called Solutreans paddled across the North Atlantic to North America, predating Clovis, the prehistoric indigenous people in North America, by thousands of years. Canada in 1491. If the saying goes, in 1492 Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, then what was it like in North America in 1491, before he arrived? This was not terra nullius, or land occupied by no one. There were indigenous societies and communities here with hundreds of languages and cultures. The arrival of the Europeans meant the arrival of guns, germs, and steel. The book of the same name makes the arguments that these are the factors that made it so easy for the Europeans to dominate the savages. Another interesting book titled 1491 basically posits that we'll never really know in detail how people lived before the arrival of the Europeans, because less than a generation after the first explorers came, much of the indigenous populations in North and South America were decimated. Columbus. It's certainly not true that Columbus discovered America. In fact, he was lost. He thought he had found a new route to India. When he met the indigenous people, he thought they were Indians, hence this word that is still used incorrectly for indigenous people in North America. Columbus actually first landed on a Caribbean island, and he met the Arawaks, who were indigenous to that region. Look at the Eurocentric way that this first encounter is depicted in the painting on screen. The white men are larger, in the foreground, and the Indians are in the background, smaller and subservient. What might Columbus have thought if he could have seen what life was like for indigenous people across Canada? At first contact, it is estimated that there were more than 500,000 people in Canada in the 15th century, prior to first contact. There were thriving economies, cities, developed languages, distinct cultures, and social systems. But with only a generation, these societies were wiped out, mostly from diseases like smallpox, tuberculosis, influenza, scarlet fever, and measles, for which the Indians had no immunity. It is estimated that between 50 and 90% of the indigenous people died. The word for Canada originated from the Huron or Iroquois word Kanata, meaning village. Two indigenous youths told Jacques Cartier about a route to Canada, meaning to a nearby settlement, likely a place the French called Stadacona, near present-day Quebec City, after first contact. Later, European explorers and settlers of the 17th and 18th centuries would have encountered quite advanced and sophisticated indigenous societies and cultures all across Canada. On the East Coast, snowshoes and canoes were invented. The St. Lawrence River was a primary transportation route. Rivalry and hostilities between the Algonquian and Iroquois nations existed. In Quebec and Ontario, southern settlements were agrarian, producing the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, using innovative agricultural practices. Settlements were based in longhouses. In the north, indigenous societies were mostly based on hunting and gathering. In the far north, the Inuit and Innu had very distinct and adaptive societies. On the prairies, there was reliance on the buffalo, with an early introduction and incorporation of horses. Tribes were nomadic and moved around following the buffalo and other food sources in a vast territory. In BC, the people relied on fish, particularly salmon, and used innovative aquacultural practices. Traditions like the potlatch were common. They were able to have a sophisticated lifestyle, stay in one place, and the societies advanced because of the abundance of fish and game. This gave them time for arts and crafts, making totem poles, intricate masks, blankets, and art. In the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, these were relatively small communities. The people were nomadic hunters and gatherers and moved seasonally from one camp to another. There was rivalry between Inuit, Dene, and Cree. Inuit across Nunavut. Inuit were found in the Northwest Territories, Inuvialuit, Nunavut, Nunavik, Northern Quebec, and Nunavut, northern Labrador. These people had the least amount and latest exposure to Europeans. They invented kayaks, igloos, and many other brilliant technologies. They relied upon seal, walrus, fish, and polar bears for food, tools, shelter, and clothing. After first contact, there arose a new group, the Métis. They existed across Canada, but the prairies were seen by many as the physical, cultural, political home of the Métis Nation. The Métis were key players in the fur trade, often employed as guides and interpreters. They developed their own language, culture, and music. They were called the Road Allowance People and were known for the Métis sash, infinity flag, beading, Métis fiddle music, and jigging. Historical cultural values. The land. What kind of values and traditions did Indigenous people have and hold dear? The answer always comes back to the land. We are people of the land. We see ourselves as no different than the trees, the caribou, and the raven, except we are more complicated. Dene Elder George Blondin. We know our lands have now become more valuable. The white people think we do not know their value, but we know that the land is everlasting, and the few goods we receive for it are soon worn out and gone. Kanasatego. The idea of caretakers of Mother Earth is central, where a spiritual connection to the land is core to Indigenous people. An elder who spoke at the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Inquiry in the 1970s in the Northwest Territories said, "Earth is our mother. How can we sell our mother?" This is a very different concept than simply seeing land as a commodity to own, buy, and sell, and extract resources from. Traditional cultural values. Family. The importance of family, of all my relations, refers to the fact that all life on earth is connected, and that family ties are very strong. In some nations, like the matriarchal Haudenosaunee Society, power and authority is passed down through the female line. There is the clan system in some nations. People know what their clans meant. For example, there are 2 clans in the Yukon, Crow and Wolf, and you must marry someone from the opposite clan. The Anishinaabe also have several clans such as Bear, Eagle, Beaver, Loon, etc., and each clan has different responsibilities. The Moose clan were hunters. The Turtle clan were teachers. The Bear clan were healers. In some communities on the West Coast, family lineage is extremely important. The totem poles you see or hear about are based on families where elders and grandparents played a key role. Traditional cultural values, language and culture. There are more than 60 different languages and dialects spoken by Indigenous people across Canada. There are 600 First Nation communities, 24 hamlets in Nunavut alone, as well as 9 constitutionally recognized Métis settlements and other Métis communities. They all have varying levels of cultural awareness, language, and traditions. There are many who say that culture and language are connected. Many Indigenous languages are endangered or on the verge of extinction. Traditions, heritage, and spirituality. There are many, many traditions from across Canada. The 7 grandfather teachings are wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, truth. The circle and the drum are 2 common symbols seen in almost every First Nation, Inuit, and Métis culture. There is a belief that humans are one of creation, but that the earth, the elements, the animals, and plants also have spirit and are important to acknowledge.
The teachings of the medicine wheel are vast. There are 7 teachings within each direction on the Ojibwe wheel, and all these have sub-teachings to them, such as where all the medicines like sweetgrass came from and what they mean. The 4 directions of the medicine wheel remind us of many things, such as the need for balance in the world and the balance we must strive for every day within ourselves. Here, you will begin to get an idea of a few of those many teachings and connections that are in the circle. Everything comes in 4s, so it's easier to digest, easier to learn. The 4 direction teachings go clockwise, beginning in the east. But before we travel around the wheel, let's look at the center.